175th session of the Literary and Scientific Society. Tonight's debate is "This House believes the British Empire did more good than harm." Help me, please. Before we get into any order of business, we'll start with council announcements. So my council announcement is please pay your membership. It's only £5 and it really helps us. Our treasurer is Daniel Toft. Any other council announcements? Dermot.
Chairman, I'm a training officer. We have a training session this Tuesday coming for all of our Irish Times speakers. It is mandatory attendance for anyone doing the Irish Times this year, so be there or you're in trouble. For everyone else, you're very welcome to come along. You'll get to learn how to debate if it's your first time. For anyone who's debated before, it's a great chance to improve your speaking skills. And it will be in the Peter Froggatt Centre at 7 o'clock, and it is in the second floor in room 17. Thank you very much.
Any other council announcements?
My announcement is also to pay your membership. It's most important if you're going to do the Irish Times, because the society can only pay for your travel and various other expenses if you are a paid up member, and that's been submitted to the SU, so that's very important for anyone doing the Irish Times. And secondly, for the people that stood at the back, there's space for 2 people here on the table if you want to come and sit down. Bye.
Also regarding the Irish Times, it seems that there's a common theme amongst here. I'm not going to actually pay your membership. Annoy Calvin and Daniel what you want by not paying your membership, unless you're in the Irish Times, in which case you must pay your membership. We're expecting our ranks to be disclosed fully and all details are circulated momentarily, ideally in the morning.
Brilliant. Is that all of the council announcements? I'd like to welcome James Orchin up to read the minutes then.
Hello everybody.
Hi James. How are you?
For last week's debate, I thought of one of the few poems I know, which is by Alexander Pope, Essay on Man, which concludes, "One truth is clear, regardless of what it is, whatever is right." Now what does he mean by that? He meant that we can't know what God thinks for us, what did he want us to do, and that his will is unknown to us. Now, in the context of last week's debate, I don't know what part of God's great plan it was to force us all to listen to last week's debate. On the 12th of October 2023, the Literific, I'm not going to read the full name of it, met for the 4th honorary meeting of the 175th session for the motion, "This House believes poetry is pointless." Now, you may think this is going to be the most boring debate ever. It wasn't. It was really angry and really tetchy. Because, when they're language students, they're not actually going to get real jobs. I call shit. As usual... Shut up. As usual, the meeting began with announcements. There were none of any real value. Following a reading of the minutes, the meeting moved to private members' business. Sam Hazlitt he's drunk apparently, raised the issue of the war in Israel. Responses were heard from Keir Robertson, Tom Burns, Megan Hewitt, Noel Barney and Misha Gerard. Keir Robertson raised the issue of political extremism. Responses were heard from Noel Barney, regrettably, Tom Burns, Max Kieran, regrettably, Daniel Toft, myself, Owen Usher, Megan Hewitt and Keir Robertson himself. Max Kieran again raised the issue of Keir Starmer getting covered in glitter. You remember when that happened? Yeah. Responses were heard from Keir Robertson, again, Daniel Toft, Noah Barnley and Megan Hewitt. Unfortunately, President's questions then took place. Max Kieran raised if the President would wear a glitter suit. Quote, "All of them, every single one of them," end quote. I don't know what the context of that was, but then the question was asked, quote, "I had lobster," end quote. Noah Barnley asked the President, what would she like to be thrown at her by a protester? Quote, "Money." Applause. Daniel Toft said that there could be a glitter suit in the funds, but he doesn't have enough money apparently to buy my Bill Clinton talking doll. Shame. Shut up. Then, somebody asked about poetry. Quote, "I didn't take any poetry modules." There was applause at that point. Quote, "I don't like writing it," end quote. Tom Burns asked to see the President's chimney sweep screenplay. Quote, "Yes, I don't have it," end quote. After President's questions, the vote in prior opinion was held. There were 7 votes for aye, 34 votes for nay, and 1 alliance voter. I'm actually allowed to say that. I wasn't allowed to say that when we were up in Stormont because we actually had an alliance MLA, and as much as I wasn't really listening to what she was saying, she was just... That was the whole thing, that was her whole speech. First in the proposition was Ronnie Lynch, and what a speech it was. Quote, I will begin my arguments by saying I am an idiot, a charlatan, and a drunkard, end quote. Ronnie argued that we had been brainwashed by bourgeois demagogues, i.e. poets. That's who most of the people who voted for him last year were, okay? But anyways, it also leads to, quote, dangerous interpretations. One can't understand what poetry is, it uses flowery language. He attacked Romanticist poetry and said it was used by the Nazis. And said that this is an example of the misuse of poetry. Because apparently the words written by a late 18th century German Romanticist poet led to the election of former Nazi as Chancellor of Germany in 1966. How that works, I don't know, but it worked in Ronnie's head and that's all that mattered. Alexander the Great was also caused 300 years of war because of poetry. Plato argued against poetry because it makes young men gay. This is a very convincing argument. He then cited the example of Nietzsche as a basis for his arguments, despite arguing that people being misused by the Nazis were wrong. But then, anyway, he then finished with a poem that he had written, quote, Poetry, poetry, I hate you. Sometimes the curtains are just blue. None of what you say is true. I can't think of a rhyme, so here's what I want to do. Get sloshed and carling at the SU. End quote. First in the opposition was the only normal person ever, Tom Burns, who was dressed as a beatnik poet. He admitted that poetry can be bad and that 15-year-old people who are depressed are also bad. Sorry, no, that's their poetry's bad. Sorry, I misread that. He also wrote poetry, and I think somebody found it near the end. To write is worthwhile. Before the time of Netflix and quote-unquote internet pornography, end quote, people waited for the poetry of Shelley, Byron and Wordsworth and pamphlets, how boring their lives were. It lacks the market value which makes it untarnished by corporate editors and consumerism. Poetry provides us more than we knew before. And then for some reason Rory appears in the minutes at this point arguing that he argued that Rory's belief is that the longer words are, the more better they are. Poetry helped Tom come to terms with his identity as a person from that county that I'm not allowed to say. As a Lidderi man, he cited Seamus Heaney, unsurprisingly, with a colloquial South Lidderi words and accent. It's a universal message, he said. Second on the proposition was Eve Conlon. She asked, who is the greatest living aesthetic mind? Rory McSparren, perhaps? It's not a poet. Poetry is an archaic form of art which is inaccessible and pretentious. Yesteryear hit with Wordsworth and Eliot. Who is there today? Music! Surely there must be something of benefit in modern poetry. She read some modern poetry. It was awful. You'll probably get that if you're a language student here. The poems were bad. Quote, it is past its peak, it's outdated, it's useless to the modern audience, end quote. Modern poetry is quote-unquote word vomit. Second on the opposition was Adam Mandeville. Quote, the entire debate so far has been framed in a disingenuous fashion. Really? The debate in an disingenuous fashion? Quote, I'm not sure they know what the topic is, end quote. The proposition, he argued, are stupid. Someone asked a question, quote, he is talking sense, it is true apparently. Art is a very middle class thing according to him. Poetry is, however, also accessible. He read a poem in Welsh about war. It could have been Welsh, no one knew because nobody here spoke Welsh, so it could have been anything he was saying. Don't say that. And in fact, it was very thoughtful and moving, however, nobody understood it. And then he started talking about dictatorships. It was apparently the next line of thought after Welsh. Apparently, he listed some dictatorships: the Soviet Union, Francoist Spain, Ireland. All bad, apparently. The final speaker for the proposition was Zach Savage. Quote, I study creative writing in English, end quote, shame. There was discussion about eating poetry. Compared to any other art form, poetry cannot convey a message as well as a novel or a play. The author's intent is often dodgy, and we can never be sure of what poetry really means. Shakespeare was a poet, yet he's only known as a playwright, not a poet. Quote, poetry has its uses. The opposition applauded at this point. The final speaker for the opposition was Megan Hewitt, who sat grimacing throughout most of the night. She stated that she wanted to, quote, claw her eyes out and crawl into the River Lagan, end quote. The motion is like trying to analyse why we breathe air. Nihilism is cringe. This elicited a very big applause, quite rightly so. Poetry means something to everyone, especially Megan herself. Quote, I read Robert Frost at A-level. I did want to die, but I don't regret it, end quote. She threatened to, quote, get rid of dubstep and drill, end quote. Everything in poetry is what you want it to be about. Then, at this point, Ronnie Lynch denied the existence of matter. And there was a lot of applause. Then, something Megan said, this is taken out completely out of context, but, quote, the working class are stupid and can't understand Shakespeare, end quote. Questions were heard from President Emeritus Daniel McCormick, HLM, Keir Robertson, Ben Holmes, I think, and Daniel Toft. Following the debate and questions from the House, the vote on speakerability took place. There were 11 for the proposition, 32 for the opposition, and 4 people weren't listening. The opposition had it.
Thank you, James. And now we can move on to private members' business, where you can discuss anything that you've seen in the news or just something you're interested in. And I'm going to go to Daniel first because I know what he has to say.
So this has been unanimously agreed by the Council of the Society. So for those of you who don't know, the Society is supported by a trust, which the Council invites a number of academics and business people and politicians and kind of other notable people from around the university, around Belfast, around Northern Ireland, to advise the Society, to kind of connect us with people, maybe guest speakers or people that could help us in whatever way. And regular meetings with the Council and the Trust are held, so the Trust can kind of hold the Council accountable to make sure that we're acting in such a way that is beneficial to Queen students. So, like I just said, the Council, trustees are invited by the Council and then ratified by the House. The Council has unanimously decided to bring forward a motion to remove one of our trustees, which is Councillor Seamus DeFuture. This is because it's become sort of a running joke in the Literific that he doesn't attend meetings, doesn't engage with the Council of any session. He's been on the Trust for a number of years and has done, after speaking to a number of former members and former presidents, it seems that he's done basically nothing. When asked by a Council member about his role as a trustee and about the obligations that he agreed to the Society, he told the Council member that he'd never agreed to be a member of the Trust, and that he didn't really know much about it and much about what it does, which seems odd given he'd been a member for maybe, I think he's been a member for 5 or 6 years now. So with the agreement of the chair of the Literific Trust, Professor Tony Gallagher, who's served maybe 10 years now, as well as the Secretary of the Trust, and unanimous agreement by the Council, we've decided to bring forward a motion at this debate to remove the councillor from the Trust, and to then after this we'll start considering names to replace that trustee with somebody who can bring variety and can advise the Council in the way that we're looking for. In the past few years, the Trust has been an invaluable resource to society, connecting us up with loads of people and making sure that we can, run not only just ordinary meetings, but we can run, vet all the trips and have guest speakers and connect with people that perhaps student societies wouldn't otherwise be able to connect with. So that's why I'm formally introducing a motion to the House this evening to remove Seamus DeFuture from the Trust, and I would need a seconder for that.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Do we have any further comments on this?
I think it is important to, particularly for, I see a lot of new faces here tonight who would want them then after when we really kind of got the Trust up and running. What a lot of we're doing at the minute in terms of getting for future lit talks, for a lot of our debates have been chaired and guest chaired by members of the Trust. I think it is important to consider that whenever you're voting on this motion, that the Trust has been absolutely invaluable in the work that we as the Council over the last 2 sessions, and what happens here in terms of where we get our money, how we're connected to people, all the debates we run. I think if you're voting here tonight, you should remember that most of what we do here, the fact that we're here, probably wouldn't be possible without the Trust. So I urge all of you to support and vote for the motion of the Council situation.
Okay, so we'll put it to a vote. If you would like to vote to remove Seamus DeFuture from the Trust, please raise your hand now. I got 39. And if you would like to keep Seamus DeFuture on the Trust, please raise your hand now.
Well, there's actually more people voting for that than there are SDLP voters.
And if you would like to abstain,
Rory!
4, 5, 5.
I love democracy.
So could I please hear the vote read aloud, please?
There were 39 votes on the side of truth and justice, 4 SDLP voters, and 5 people don't know who he is and live in a much better world than the rest of us.
Well, that's Seamus Tavicha, formally removed from the Literific Trust. Do we have any other pieces of private members' business? I'll go to Fintan.
I'm going to try to avoid the elephant in the room regarding international affairs and talk about something else. Yes, I'd like to speak about Canada. What? Recently, the Indian government assassinated a Canadian citizen in Vancouver over alleged involvement in the Khalistani movement. This is a egregious. Yes, I do, because I want the House to condemn the actions. No, I want to vote this afternoon. I'd like to.
No more proposing motions, please.
Okay, I won't propose a motion, but I'd like to hear from the House regarding how Canada should best, and perhaps even the Commonwealth should agree to deal with such actions against the sovereign state.
I'll go to Jonathan.
Canada should immediately launch a full-ground invasion.
I'll go to Noah.
Modi never done anything to me.
Oh, God.
Is that a second? Is that a second?
No, I'll go to Dermot.
I think Justin Trudeau is quite possibly the second most attractive world leader in the world, and that we should all throw our support behind him. Emmanuel Macron.
Is there anyone else on Canada as a whole? Any new pieces of private members' business? I'll go to Max Kieran.
No, let people. Well, let James type it up first.
Wait for James.
We have 10 minutes.
It's all recorded.
Jesus, alright, fine.
It's all recorded.
Go.
Many Jake Kieran's
But yes, I do actually have some grave news to inform the House about. So I was in the SU earlier today and I came to a grave conclusion. It turns out that the room known as the QUB is a rectangle. And I just realized this. And I cannot say how much this minorly infuriates me who hates false labeling of products. So I'm wondering whether the House could condemn the QUB and force its name to be changed to the rectangle.
Why do so many people want to respond to this?
Can I just ask a question here? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, so if you look at it, it's already quite long.
I assumed that it would be in a useful shape.
Okay, Dermot, please.
I'd like to propose that the House recognise that obviously Millie J. Kieran is a bit thick. We're not realising this, a long time ago.
I'm a first year.
Coincidentally, you never leave our So, how have you not realised this already? It's massively long and not that wide.
Max, trust.
No, not on now.
No more bullying,
I have
Max.
one more piece of.
Yes.
I'd like to propose on behalf of society that a sword be purchased. To be in accordance to follow in the great tradition of many other debating societies.
One debate.
On this.
I'll go to Owen because he actually knows about this.
Important context. The hist. Apologies. Very rightfully. The Phil, or the society that Fintan is referring to, the Phil brought a sword in like the early 2000s. It was cool. They broke it, which is not cool.
The sword of society.
I don't trust you people. I don't trust you, Fintan, specifically. Actually, I don't trust Dermot either. Dermot's going to you really want this fucker? You reach my sword.
Or you have.
Okay.
I deserve a response to that.
Okay, response to the sword.
I would like to propose this motion in favour of completely legally acquired Marmalite.
I'm not taking any more votes on things
German
today.
Apple wants to buy a wet budget.
Do we have a normal piece of private members' business? I don't trust you. I'm going to go to Keir.
Right.
Change your name for a minute.
Pardon?
Name.
Keir Robertson.
Oh.
Right, so the other week, I was looking at the cinema to see if there are any movies on. I couldn't realize they're all just not bad, they're just mediocre. And I realized something. We need to make movies worse. Because terrible movies, they are so much fun to watch. They are so fun. We need to actively work to make Hollywood worse. Because the problem with Hollywood is it's too bland. We need it to be terrible CGI, terrible voice acting, terrible lip sync, anything. We need movies to become bad so we can be entertained again.
I'll go to Abby.
Abby Beatty for the minutes. Does this imply that Keir Robinson does not expect the FNAF movie to be incredibly abysmal?
Anyone else on movies getting worse? I'll go to Darren.
You would have loved the 2008 recession. That was the best era for shit films. It was amazing. It was all really low quality action films, poor animation, and Michael Bay. The best period of cinema ever since like the golden age. You know, loved it.
Anyone else on the bar?
Counterpoint. Fantastic Mr. Fox came out in 2009. I'll have you know. So the recession's kill off.
But that's a good film.
I'll go to Adam.
Where's Archie's now? Hold on.
That's actually the exact point I made.
You're correct.
Kara, please.
To be fair, I still remember ages ago where, like, I watched, I believe, the second Fantastic Beasts film, was very confused, and just ended up ranting about it, even though I don't really care much for Harry Potter. And honestly, I do agree with that in a sense, because it's just fun to rant about stuff like that. Like, I was recently watching the second episode of the new Castlevania series. The first one was fantastic. I'm only on episode 2 of this series, but it's awful so far. And it got to the point that me and my boyfriend realised that we genuinely had talked more and laughed at it more than actually watching the episode.
Empire expanded its border outreach to West Africa, Argentina, South America, setting up naval bases, foreign embassies, foreign police stations in democratic nation states, and all that was covered by Trump demeaning women on the pulpit of the White House, trying to overturn the democratic election, and generally being an absolute twat, and disgracing the entire democratic world as a whole. So I hope he gets at least some form of jail time and can't run again.
I'll take one more point on this and then we'll move on.
On what Matt said, I think there is a broader point to be made how, like, in our modern day version of of politics, where it feels like it's all about spectacle, about like owning your opponents, you sort of see figures like Trump that have spawned up and end up distracting from very real, where like headlines are what these outrageous, outlandish figures have said, and not the real harm that it's ended up being caused during their terms. So it's just something to think about with how sensationalized everything is now. We sometimes think about like the like small things that we never consider the major things that these people are doing.
Brilliant. And now we move on to President's Questions, where you have 5 minutes to ask me anything you want, as long as it's not political. Cormac?
What did you have for breakfast today?
Lobster again.
Okay.
Swan? I don't know.
What did we have for lunch today?
You stopped my 2 responses. Lamb. Max?
On the topic of food, what's your favourite takeout order?
Oh, it's really... Because I'm actually a vegetarian, so I'm a liar. But, so it's literally just really, really basic. It's like curry chips or something.
That's decent, right?
Dermot?
You just admitted to being small. As anyone that is a citizen of His Majesty's United Kingdom, knows that all all the public swans in Britain are owned by His Majesty King Charles III, Defender of the Faith. And what you've done is actually just admit to a crime. So, will you submit yourself to the relevant authorities to this crime and attack on our liberal democracy?
That wasn't me, that was... That wasn't Madam President, that was Telsha McSparn, she's a completely different person. Any other questions?
Well, Evan Tye for the minute. Will the President concede that the only swans owned by His Majesty the King are the unmarked mute swans on the River Thames? And so, in fact, it would be possible for you to as a vegetarian, for your previous question, not as indeed be able to eat swans.
Well, there you go, Dermot.
Actually, it's any unclaimed mute swan in open water.
Oh my god.
Okay, moving on.
This is a PSA, don't do law.
I'll go to Noah.
After everyone's like very original scathing critique of Trump, can we get him in the Literific Trust instead?
Man.
I mean, you could ask him if you have a contact. I should go get the trust secretary, Ryan Hoy, to ask him.
To be fair, he's probably going to be out of
Kira.
commission very soon. Hello. So, what are your plans for Halloween, and what are you going to dress up as for Halloween?
I'm going to a Halloween party this Saturday. And I was either thinking of doing Princess Fiona from Shrek or a pirate. Kier.
Right, so imagine there is a trolley going down a track. and it's going over, and it's going to hit 5 people. But there's a lever, and you can change the track, but if you change the track, it also hits 5 people.
So which half of the car siblings is it?
No. Is there one more question? I'll go to you.
Let's say there's a trolley and it's going to hit someone either way, but you can pick lever and send the trolley down a 1,000-mile stretch of track where every single part of the trolley is placed. Is the trolley that hits the person?
I feel like it's more of like an ancestor of the first trolley.
Maybe an ancestor?
I'll take one more question and then move on. Geese? I love them. North Belfast Waterworks has them. And now we'll move on to our vote of prior opinion. So if you side with the proposition tonight and you believe that the British Empire did more good than harm, please raise your hand now.
You're a great friend of I'm gonna grab my phone.
12, sure. And if you side with the opposition tonight and you believe it did more harm than good, please raise your hand now. 7, 8, 9, 10. 42. I got 42. And if you'd like to abstain on the motion, please raise your hand now.
Guys, you voted 3 times now.
Yeah.
No, you voted 3 times.
So I can do plus on later.
Could you please read out the vote on prior opinion?
On this really exciting debate, there were 12 votes for aye, 37 votes for nay, and 7 people are Welsh. The opposition for now has it.
Brilliant. And before we start the speeches, I'd like to read out the rules. So each speech, yes, people might know. Each speech is 7 minutes long. First and last minute, protected time, which will be signalled by a bell down there, meaning that you can only POI people in the middle 5 minutes. To POI, raise your hand and say point of information on that point, or POI. Please keep your POIs to 10 seconds and no barracking, meaning wait at least 15 seconds after giving a POI to give another one. Also, very importantly, no back and forth. Lastly, no swearing. It is now constitutional that if you swear, we will fine you a bottle of port, not that anyone actually brings them. Thank you.
Right, after 3 weeks, yes. You give me.
And with that, I would like to welcome Admiral Finton Lawler, HLM, to open the proposition.
It's happened again. The title machine has given me a new one. So, I think the first question is to ask, why on earth am I speaking at the risk of my kneecaps? If talking about the past whilst wearing a suit and round glasses can get Jacob Rees-Mogg a knighthood, why can't I? Perhaps so. I think it does bear to preface this entire speech by stating that we do not condone and we acknowledge the sheer atrocities committed by the British Empire, nor do we wish to dismiss them throughout this debate. However, the motion does state that we are to convince you that that the British Empire throughout has done more good than harm, and that is what we, the proposition, venture to do. However, it's not politically convenient to acknowledge this. To be totally fair, it is now the political norm to suggest that the British Empire was the worst thing that ever imaginable, beyond that of cold custard, mince pies that are undercooked, and perhaps, I don't know, think of something worse, a spider in a bath. So, perhaps I'm going to start with the most controversial of all, India. And I'm going to imagine that the first thing that's going to be said to me is the Bengal famine. I do wish to counter that with the Famine Acts, instituted in 1780. Between 1780 and 1943, there were no famines in India, or no famines great enough that it could be constituted to be of a large scale. Prior to that, a famine in India was a roughly once every 50-year event in which many millions of people died.
On that point, I suppose that makes all those people dying better than it was made illegal.
No, it was not made illegal. It was the fact that they brought in a work for food scheme, much like that in the sense that it didn't work in Ireland, but it seemed to work in India inexplicably. During this, can I just continue, please? Thank you. During this period, many millions of lives were saved. Of course, many millions of people died in the Bengal famine. However, let's just equate the numbers here, the amount of lives saved versus the amount of lives lost. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Live long and prosper. Equally, look at the products of the empire all across the world. The map is gone, and the map wasn't even a full map, so it doesn't count. So we had Canada and New Zealand. Those are probably two beneficiaries of the British Empire, two nations that continue to have a major impact on the global scale that is on the whole positive. Of course, let's ignore the savages in Australia and in America. Equally, let's also consider more of the products of the British Empire. International trade and international banking, the very system on which our modern lives are predicated upon. What was that noise? Are you using your phone during a debate?
Yeah, I was going to play Rubble Tandy for you.
That's wonderful. Cotton, linen, rum, and to a lesser extent tobacco are those trade lines that exist today, although pre-existing to the empire, as the honourable member would soon point out to me if he was given the chance, were bolstered by the empire and now continue to. No, please just let me speak. I'm terribly sorry. Allow for these various things. Great feats of civil engineering are products of the empire. The railway through India, the Suez Canal in its current form, the railway through South Africa, from Rhodesia to Ceylon, a telegraph existed, allowing for very quick communication, allowing for the spread of ideas, and equally universities to be set up. Wherever the Union flag had flown and the Royal Standard, what followed was employment, industrial development, and of course, universities. If we were to sit here in our wonderful university that was indeed created by the products of the empire and suggest that the empire did more harm than good, I suggest we're all a bit hypocritical. If we were to sit here and suggest, I don't like it, but I do quite like studying here. It's picking and choosing. We need to take the whole issue as a whole. Take the whole issue.
Point?
Yes.
British Empire founded Trinity College Dublin. Do you think that's a really positive contribution?
Yes, I do. Trinity is a wonderful institution. Indeed.
Swear word.
Fuck. So as we continue to that, we also must consider the general social impact. While we don't want to discuss the savages in America that on a date that we'd rather not dwell on, 1776, they decided to run away and do their own silly little thing. The British Empire managed to end slavery whilst fighting away with... I'm going to keep on speaking, and I will take it. Oh wait, no, we're in protected time, I believe. Oh, we're not. Oh, okay. Sorry, thank you. Okay, no, I'll take it now, actually.
It's one of the most biggest components of the slave trade. Just because you put your hand in the fire and then take it out eventually doesn't mean you're good for actually taking it out.
Well, this comes into an issue perhaps that would best be explained with the Church of England. The Church of England did indeed, for a long time, was a proponent of slavery, but soon realised that perhaps it isn't the best. Indeed, as I actually prefaced in my speech, it did create a lot of... The British Empire was the source of a lot of harm. However, it also prevented a great deal of it. That was a very weak rebuttal, I've just realised, and I shouldn't have acknowledged that. So perhaps we must also acknowledge that perhaps what some would say the culturalist West has allowed us to bring forward. The British Empire brings forth values of stoicism and civil dialogue, very values that we seem to enjoy today, particularly regarding the fact that we are in a debating society going under some through discussing using civil dialogue. The Bible, the Book of Common Prayer, and other seminal works allowed for a system of doing business and of doing government that continues to be somewhat effective today. Not perfect, but at least somewhat effective. I put it then, therefore, to you all that perhaps the British Empire was indeed was a source for good, slightly less than the harm that it did. Thank you.
Who was that? Well, I don't usually do this, talk about what the previous speaker did, but I feel compelled to. I mean, I always wondered how you could defend Britain ending slavery by giving millions to the people who had enslaved them and somehow turn it into a good thing. It's like if you gave a human trafficker money today and you called it justice for freeing the people they have trafficked. And today I'm here to talk about some of the darker myths of empire, and I'm going to talk about some of the truths too. There is an enormous disparity between what empires do and how they are represented in history. Empires are pretty much written about by people who live in the imperial countries, and so the treatment of empires is largely celebratory. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? Empires are often represented as creations of peace. Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which was really just a brutal, bloody world conquest. Pax Britannica, and now there's even Pax Americana. Empires are often represented as bringing stability, justice and prosperity to their subject people, who bring order to where once there was disorder. And the British Empire, it's often represented as being unintentional, a product of unconscious circumstance. Have you ever heard that the British Empire was put together in a fit of absent-mindedness? Cyril Robinson, a British historian, he says the same thing about the Roman Empire. It was perhaps almost as true of Rome as of Great Britain. She acquired her world domination in a fit of absence of mind. How do you build an empire in a fit of absence of mind? Do you wake up and go, let's just conquer India today? Sure.
Well, if we're going to discuss India, the conquering of India was done through the British East India Company, which had no government involvement. See, the sole corporation. The acquiring of India into the British Crown was done through realisation of welfare standards. It is indeed a state of absent-mindedness because it was passive.
And you have to ask who benefited from the East India Trading Company. It certainly wasn't the ordinary British people. It certainly wasn't the Indians. And it was really just the Bank of England and the East India Trading Company. And so it's sort of represented as unintentional. And they also talk about how it took on millions of alien dependents around the globe. Before the British, they were independents. A moment's reflection would tell you that the British Empire was a product of deliberate contrivance, deliberate confection, planning, calculation and manipulation. No social order can maintain itself in the long run without conscious human agency. In fact, that's why you have a state to maintain a particular set of interests and order. Looking back on the British Empire, it is clear to see that the British Empire did not act in the interests of the millions who lived under its rule, but also did not act in the interests of the British people. And in recent years we have heard talk about the discrimination under the British Empire. Usually this revolves around the racism that was fostered and grew with the empire. Many empire apologists typically reduce this reality to being of the time. They would have us believe that the plunder, the slavery, the exploitation, the rape of women, the enforced poverty is to be ignored and irrelevant to the modern world, and that anybody who challenges them is simply being a radical or ideological. Roisin and Owen will elaborate more on the great human suffering that occurred under the empire. The only downside with those who sort of talk about the empire and challenge it is that they're typically not radical enough. Liberal commentators rarely ask, why empire? Why have an empire? To whom is it a benefit? We often hear the myth that Britain went to poor countries. We heard it earlier about India. Now, India was a rich, advanced, developed country until the British went in 1800, and between 1800 and 1830, the Indian textile industry, which was outperforming the British textile industry in exports and quality, was dismantled. The whole balance of trade was shifted. The great textile centres of Dhaka and Madras were deindustrialised, and the people were sent back out onto the land to grow cotton for factories in Manchester and London. And between 1850 and 1900, no thank you, Indian per capita income fell by 65%. No thank you. The poverty in the third world, that so-called underdevelopment, these so-called developing nations that are now beginning to get on their feet, they were not poor, they were made poor. So there was a totally exploited population in England and a lesser but still exploited burgeoning working class in England. Sorry, in India for the totally exploited population. Yes, sure.
Your whole spiel at the start was about how empires weren't interested in supporting the ordinary British people at home, and yet you've just talked about how they actively sought to improve industry back home in Britain.
Well, have you ever seen industry in 19th century Britain? It was not good. It was a totally exploited class of people.
Point of clarification.
No, thank you.
That's not clarification.
Yeah. And so looking at the textile industry is exactly what I meant when I said perceptions of the empire as told by those who did the oppression, who look at empire, talk about empire, make whole movies about empire without talking about these political realities. Now, we heard a bit more about how in this trading company from Finton there, the British ruling interests made billions for over 100 years. When they talked about the jewel of the crown, they were talking about empire. The countries that Britain went to were artificially converted into utterly impoverished nations. That's the key term, artificially converted. And of course, when they started oppressing and killing people of a different skin tone, that came in handy for the empire. They started calling them moral inferiors, savages. How often do we hear that myth that Britain went in and civilised people? Countries far more developed than Britain, people who were teaching algebra and had their own townships and civilisations hundreds of years before the British, when the British were painting their faces blue and still living in the forest.
At that point.
No thank you. The historians who say that to understand an era, we must immerse ourselves into the context completely and see it through the eyes of the participants. When you do that uncritically so, you see it through the eyes of the dominant participants. Some of the literature from the time is much more captivating. We've heard talk about 19th century industry. Oliver Twist details the cruelty of the era and what was a reality for many English people. From the first line of Pride and Prejudice, we see an account of the scramble for marriage during the Regency era. And I've been informed by the opposition that Mr. Darcy was very good looking, but what I had to say is that Mr. Darcy was just another capitalist imperialist pig. And you talk about the human development and all. So many of the world's greatest economists say empire is irrational because it costs more than what we get out of it. The British, it cost them more in India than what they got out of it. And that's when you think without looking at political, economic realities, because as we know, and you will all know before the evening's over, it is very profitable. The wealth that's extracted from imperialism goes into the coffers of the select few, whereas the costs of empire are paid out of the common treasures of the people. And so it was with the British Empire in India and elsewhere, it was the ordinary Brits, the ordinary working people who paid for the costs of empire, and it was the Bank of England and the East India Company that got the wealth. And as I previously said, the British Empire, product of the liver contrivance, manipulation. Okay, that's all, but thank you.
Thank you, Cormac, and I'd like to welcome another brother, Rory Viscount.
things I would like to say. The 19th century had a very, very big thing happening. I think it was an industrial revolution for Britain. So maybe their industry was quite good and it wasn't really that bad in the 19th century. But to the members of the House tonight, I am a nationalist. You may think traditionally it's quite funny that I'm speaking on a motion saying the British Empire is actually very, very good. And so did I. When I actually started considering the motion, I was left quite frankly speechless. Not literally, I have sort of wrote a speech from the 2 hours of prep time that I have had. Because of all the positive good that the British Empire has attributed across the world. We, the proposition, are not saying that the British Empire is incapable of causing harm. We agree with a lot of the atrocities that they have committed that the opposition has even suggested. Every democracy in existence, in any form of government, any form of state to exist has caused harm to the extent throughout their lifetime. Every state has its own atrocities, especially when you look at an empire as long surviving as the British Empire. We all know and love when they made a mistake, they adapt, they recognise the mistake, and they pay reparations for their mistakes. Before I properly begin, there are 3 things I would like to exhibit to the House to show that the British Empire has definitely caused some form of good. Yes?
If they had paid reparations for all their mistakes, then why is there still a bunch of foreign stuff in British museums?
Museums is a contested issue. I will agree with you, but it's not really relevant because it's such a minimal thing they have done compared to that long-standing good they have done. And a lot of the museums also have tried return some of the usurped items they have stolen from lands. But I want to still, explain the 3 things I love about, the British Empire. Sandwiches, named after the 4th Earl of Sandwich, who had quite a bad gambling addict and invented the sandwich because he wanted to eat cured meats while playing cards. Java cakes, because I like Java cakes. Yes?
This feels very weak when they brought up
I just love Java cakes. I'm about to properly debate, do not worry. And of course, the telephone and the television. To actually argue this motion, we have to understand when the British Empire became an actual democracy and not a kleptocracy or an oligarchy, where the power was balanced in the hands of a small elite section of society. Democracy, the word stems from Greek, so demos and kratos, or demos and kratin, which means people power or power to the people. The people of the United Kingdom did not actually receive suffrage until 1870. Now that's people in the homeland, so in England, where every man in 1870 who was a landowner would be able to vote no matter his religion or anything. No, thank you. And then in 1918, when the United Kingdom officially became, in my opinion, a functioning modern democracy, that is when they gave women the vote, and all men. The British Empire of today has been built off of the mistakes of the past that the not really democratic British Empire caused. They have turned the harm they have caused into positives for the modern world. One of the real main bad things the Empire caused, which is possibly the most damaging thing that actually happened to the British Empire, was the Irish famine, which was completely avoidable, I will agree. This was fundamentally because of how the political system of Ireland worked. After the Act of Union, where Irish Parliament was abolished by the Anglo-Irish elites, the landed aristocracy lived like kings in their big houses, introducing things like rack rent. Some of them weren't even in Ireland. They would be called absentee landlords, and charged the tenants high prices for land. Most didn't pay rent with actual money back then. They paid things with like crops and livestock. The British Empire realised that the landowners had far too much power, and they changed it. And they removed the sweeping power the landlords have. James Fintan Lawler is actually a relative of Mr. Lawler's over here, was very important during that time period. But in 1870, because of the Irish famine and the injustices that happened in Ireland, we got a better form of democracy. The British realised their mistake. The Empire realised their mistake. I really noticed it, especially when watching Downton Abbey. They live in a very big house in Downton Abbey. But I actually, can someone give me a point of information of the main lord's name? Lord Grantham. Lord Grantham. He has no sweeping power that he used to have if he lived in the 18th century in the 18th century compared to no, not the 18th century, compared to the 19th century to the 20th century. It is ridiculous. The British Empire, no, I'm in the wrong place. No, thank you. The point I'm trying to put to the House tonight is that the British Empire used to be fully ruled by the aristocracy, by the elites, by the nobility. But the British Empire, no thank you, is no longer run by the small section of society. We gained full functioning democracy. We can literally chart to where the harm in Ireland turns to good. If we even look past this look at Home Rule. The House of Lords, because of Home Rule, became contested. Now it's, guess what? It no longer has the power of ultimate veto. You can now get anything passed through the House of Lords. It can be overturned once or twice, but nothing past it. It is a democratic system. No, thank you.
He's not going to take it.
I've already answered like 3. Come on. It is clear that the Empire has been trying to achieve a better future for all. Yes, there is missteps, especially in Ireland, but they are trying, which shows an objective for morality, which is good. And you want to know what else the Empire did? They spread this democracy across the world. Let's look at the big one. America. Now, not a perfect state, we can all agree, but one must love how the Americans have such lovely, lovely things. Like nice cars, good food, nice flag, American bald eagles. But the musical Hamilton has lied to us. The Empire did not want to let America go, but what really happened was that the radical Presbyterians from Britain and Ireland, keep in mind, wanted home rule in the Americas. They wanted to remove themselves from the British Empire, and they achieved it. And with them came their lovely democratic ideals, their lovely constitution, their lovely forms of republicanism. You love it. We have to understand that the way the proposition are going to argue tonight is going to be against that. They don't want to conform to basically any form of modern society because they can't live in the future, because they're living in the past. They can't get over the suppressive ideals that's happened to them. The Industrial Revolution, really, really good. Just because I have to go now. You would love it. It gave you all these pretty things like iPads and tables and, silk and, women's rights, basically. So, just say, good night.
Gonna start in 3, 2.
Oh, you already started.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. 3, 2, 1. When writing this speech, I was rather worried that I would be, taking a big arrogant gamble by trying to predict exactly what the first 2 proposition speakers would say. But what do you know? I was right. So, really quickly, President, Council, esteemed members of the Literific. Really nice to be here. Of course, I'm Tory scum. Tofu-eating, Guardian-reading Wokarati, which I now associate myself with. Quick disclaimer, I do not hold the people on that side, personally to the things they say. Devil's advocacy is an important thing for constructive discourse. But really quickly, to deal with the arguments we've heard thus far from Beelzebub and Associates. Fenton talked about trade. Here's why free trade happened under the British Empire. You see, Adam Smith wrote a book, and it had a very influential idea. And when Britain lost at Yorktown, they then basically came to the conclusion that it would be more financially efficient if we just exploited our dwindling colonies through trade. That is why that happened. It is the same motivation. And you can obviously argue benefits for that, but it's going to be outweighed by everything else. Talk about spreading our Western values and our democracy. We've had a lot of that. I'm going to be getting to that. A couple other things. The East India Company, who owned it? Very similar overlap with the people in the British government. They effectively outsourced their colonialism. That doesn't make it very different. Yeah. So a couple of things. So I'm from the south, so it's obvious. Exactly. So you'd expect it to be obvious on what side I'm speaking, but I do also go to Trinity, so it's kind of a bit of a toss-up. So there is way too much. Fenton's on loan from us. So There are, like, as we all know, I'm sure, too many things to cover in the British Empire. I'm not here to lecture you about the things you've experienced far more importantly than I have. Really kind of two general things here. I want to respond directly to what is probably the best cases they have on their side. Generating the wealth that many of us benefit from today, like Dermot's POI, and spreading Western values, particularly those of democracy. Really quickly on the whole wealth thing, even if all of this is true, get this, there are fewer people in the British Isles than there are everywhere else in the world. No, thank you. India is quite outpopulating you and this wealth was generated by the exploitation of these countries and therefore they cannot benefit from them today. For example, one of the most successful former colonies is Botswana. Part of why they were able to develop their economy early on is because they actually had a lot of precious natural resources left which they were able to extract. So that was part of their success. You robbed them all blind, that is how they are, that is why they're in the situation they are today. No, thank you. Just need to get through a few things. Okay. But like all this whole like developing domestic industry thing, again, outweighed. Now obviously this can tip a scale, but the most important thing is this spreading Western values, particularly those of democracy. Really quickly, like the idea that this whole Western values thing are better, one, slightly biased because we think we're right, but I would agree that democracy is kind of good. We'll get to that in a bit. No, thank you. Important characterization we've heard so far that I will agree with. When we talk about what the British Empire did, this doesn't just end about 1945. I would argue this extends into British foreign policy in the coming decades after that, because I think it's fairly simple to say that the fact that the empire existed and was maintained had a large impact on how Britain approached foreign policy. It gave them the influence they had, even when it was beginning to dwindle, it put them there. So, spreading these righteous values. Why? So, we're saying that we're going to be spreading democracy to our former colonies. Slide, if you will. So, the former British Empire. Next slide. The Economist Democracy Index. And 3. Next slide. Side by side. Particularly in the areas we're talking about, I don't really see much of a positive contribution from British Empire to democracy here. Of course, South Africa's blue. South Africa's great unless you know anything about South Africa pre-1994. And Botswana we already covered, a few exceptions. Sure, India is kind of getting there, but as was previously discussed in private business earlier, India is not exactly doing very great. Next slide. So, no real positive correlation here. Good, okay, so. Mixed results at best, but it's worse. See, the reason the British Empire spread this democracy, often specifically the Westminster system, wasn't for the value of democracy, it was for conformity, to make their subjects more like them and dependent on them, and this is what happened when they voted wrong. Next slide. The proposition cannot claim imperial democracy in the face of this. These are obviously a mix of like varying levels of evidence, but there are some of them the UK absolutely backed coup d'etat. Few examples, my friends. Where do we start? Iran. Iran in the 1950s elected a secular democratic government. Iran. But they were overthrown by the UK and their demonic offspring, the United States, for trying to nationalize their oil. This then put the Shah back in, an absolutely brutal dictator, and everybody hated the Shah so much, they brought in the Ayatollah to replace him, and Iran has been ruled by that regime ever since, and is a fundamentalist, Sharia law-ruled state that is now executing women for not conforming to their laws. That was started by the British Empire. They stopped their one hope at getting anywhere, at going in a different direction. Others assassinated, helped start a coup that ended up assassinating the prime minister, the democratically elected prime minister of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo in the early 1960s. This kicked off a major crisis that killed the UN Secretary General and several peacekeepers from this island. Actually, yeah, Fintan, sure.
The Congo was not one of these. This was belonged to Belgium. There's nothing to do with.
Oh yeah, you helped out the Belgians. Good job. Sorry, if you know any, like the Congo crisis, everybody cared about it because there were a lot of natural resources. It was originally a former Belgian colony. They got independent, then everybody else wanted a bit of some. But yeah, you helped out the Belgians. Good job. No, thank you. So. British intelligence also welcomed the coup in Chile in 1973, which saw the overthrow of its democratic leadership to be placed with Auguste Pinochet. No. I think my point has been made. So their main positives completely destroyed. Really quick atrocity lightning round. From 1880 to 1920, it's estimated between 50 and 100 million Indians died because of economic management that reduced their quality of life. Pioneering the concentration camp in the Boer Wars, divide and rule, fueling up conflict in India and Pakistan, also creating Israel, which has got to, let's say, possibly been mismanaged a little bit. They are Every time the British Empire get to draw a map, they do it with no disregard for ethnic conflict. They are completely ignorant of what is happening with the people they are affecting. They are cartographical terrorists and nothing more and nothing less. My friends, the path to the progress claimed by the proposition is paved with far too many bodies and painted with too much innocent blood. These violent delights have violent means, and the ends here cannot, will not, and must never, ever justify the means. I have never been, and perhaps will never be, more proud to oppose than I am tonight. Thank you very much.
You know it. If you're gonna whistle at me, they'll buy me a drink later because I'm broke. Alright. A little bit of fun. Nothing in Ireland, north, south, east and west, has suffered as much as the broken pledges of British statesmen. Now once again I open a speech with a quote from the Lord Edward Carson, and once again his words are just as relevant to us now as they were in the 1910s and 20s. The proposition, you see, are on the right side of history. While the opposition would like to fire rhetoric at you, would like to fire poorly navigated arguments, would like to fire the inability to actually read a map at you, and, well, they're just not very convincing. So, let's look at some of the good parts of the British Empire. Universities, vaccinations, which, you know, I quite like. What else? Cleanliness, railways, modern democracy, and no thanks. You know, all quite nice things. The opposition hit us with a big, lovely map of all the places that they believe were backed in UK-backed coups. Now, Australia was weirdly in that, despite the fact despite the fact that what actually happened there was an entirely legal government move. They talked about Allende when that was almost entirely a US-led coup, as anyone that has studied the Chilean region would tell you, because if you read anything from Nixon and Reagan's eras, it's very clearly a US-backed coup. Just because the UK, who were a capitalist nation, and representatives of Europe happened to support something, doesn't mean that it was entirely a fault of the British Empire. Let's, you know, learn our history and understand how that thing. Also, you know what else I have in common with Brewery? I like Jaffa Cakes. Jaffa Cakes are fucking great. And no, I will not. No, shut up, little man. And no, I will not pay a port fine before you even ask. I fucking like Jaffa Cakes. They're fucking great, right? I like sandwiches, crisp sandwiches, the quintessential British invention. The invention of the ability to put cured ham and gammon into a sandwich invented by the great British Empire alongside Tito cheese and onion. Specifically Northern Tito, not that Free State shite. My dear young McSparran Cormac, as always, kind of ignored my POI when hit with it. He talked about how we plundered India and Pakistan, we destroyed their textile industry in order to make it better for the one back at home in Britain. But weirdly, creating jobs, improving industry wasn't better for the ordinary people back home in Britain, which is exactly what he argued. So Cormac, is it better or is it worse? No. So apparently the British textile industry being good is bad for ordinary people, but also it's not. Figure it out, Cormac. Sure. Are you putting this in why? Or
You worked in a mill in 19th century England.
Well, weirdly, because I'm 19, I haven't. But I'll give it a shot next time I'm back in 1850. Most of the let's also look at kind of that. If we can go back to that, if we can go back to that map, very conveniently, I'm going to figure out. Oh, there we go.
Arrow keys.
Hold on, it's alright, I've got it. So, let's examine this. So all the evil countries, so you know here, They're all, so, you know, these kind of guys here. So Libya, really evil in terms of democracy. Oops, sorry, they weren't on
Point.
No. You wouldn't take any of mine, so I'm not taking any of yours. Look at all these bad countries. Quite a lot, you know. Coronation here. Then let's look at quite a lot of the blue ones. Blue one, blue one, blue one, blue one. That's light yellow. Nice yellow.
On that point.
So where'd that come from? Alright.
Okay, so does the opposition's
I can't hear you. Will you speak up?
Yeah, does the opposition's inaccuracy make up for the millions of people that the British Empire can inadvertently kill anyway?
Well, we're in a debate here, Noah, so I'm rebutting his point, but I'll come to that. Barracking, thank you very much. So no, of course it doesn't. Them being stupid doesn't make up for the fact that sometimes the Brits were cunts. Right, of course not. Because if we held Trinity responsible for everything an empire did, we wouldn't get very fucking far. Oh, I'm not taking your fucking points. You wouldn't take mine. Big crisps. So I actually want to look at this idea of the empire, the great British empire of exploitation. The evil oppressive governments that they put in place that destroyed the states of India, destroyed Africa, all about that, how these evil fucking governments came in, and there's no point, Bart, I'm not paying a fine. Right. Interestingly, Uganda, right, let's look at Uganda. The evil British oppressive empire came in and governed them without their consent. What you'll also notice is that Uganda, in its civil service, only had 25 British officials. The rest were all local young people. No. The Indian civil service. Now, I want you to remember that India has roughly over 1 billion people living there now. I can't speak to how many it had in the 1800s, but only had roughly 2,000 people in its civil service. So, really, if they're that oppressive, then why was there so many Indian and Ugandan people running the bloody country? Doesn't sound that bad to me. But I want to deal with one final issue. Empire in itself. Who was running around back in the 1800s, ransacking the world other than the Brits? And I put to you one example, my friends. The fucking French. This great British Empire was the last bastion against those oppressive, croissant on baguette eating bastards. They protected us from their popery, from their abolitionism, from their awful French ideals. They protected us, they protected Ireland, they protected the rest of the world from what they would have us. Eating snails and shagging our cousins. People not shaving and a lot of really, really mediocre wine. What we offer you tonight on the proposition is nothing. Ignore the rest of it. Because all that matters is they protected us from those twirly mustache bastards. They protected us from France. And while our dear fools from Trinity would have us believe that we should succumb to the French, should succumb to their bastardized, ignorant form of governments, their revolutionary ideas, and their awfully large amount of inbreeding, we should not. So I end my speech here tonight, friends, that if you vote for the opposition, then you support France. And if you do that, you're no friend of mine.
Before I do this, trigger warning of rape and murder in our speech as well, so welcome on.
I just want to begin by saying that there's a lot of shagging of cousins that happen in Newtown Hamilton, Dermot. So I don't know if the British protected us from Newtown Hamilton themselves. I do have a stone. I will get back to that. It is important. But for now, History is written by the victors, and tonight, if we allow ourselves in this room to be gaslit by the proposition, then we will allow the British Empire not only to have committed the grievous harms they have already committed, but we will allow them to dictate history. We will allow the voices of the victims to die once more, and the victims will be martyred again. But you know, folks, conquest, battles, treasures, a king or queen atop a throne, Carson, the spread of democracy, booming industry, booming economy. It's a really, really good story. Good job, folks. But it's a fucking lie. It's a half-truth. It's a half-truth. It's cherry picking and it's gaslighting of history. Put your hand down. I do want to say tonight, folks, the motion is that the British Empire did more good than harm. We're not denying that they did some good. My ancestors just rolled in their graves. We're not denying that they did some good. We are simply saying that it is a matter of bringing out scales. It's a matter of weighing it up, and we are saying that the harm that has been done outweighs the good. And if you agree with that tonight, you have to vote with the opposition. And I'm going to tell you a lot of the harm that was done. I'm going to, as Talcha mentioned, the topics of rape in this, there's topics of murder in this, because that is the real truth of empire, and it is the real truth of the British Empire. But the proposition tonight have said the minimal bad they've done has been undermining the face of the good. Vinton said it's a source of a lot of harm and it's not perfect, so he himself admitted that. He said sometimes the British were cunts. That sort of is the majority of the history, folks. Put your hand down. I'm not taking your point of information because you have gaslit the people of this room tonight, and I don't think it does them any justice to have to listen to you for 1 minute longer. I do have to wonder, folks. We were actually saying that there was an inability to read a map. Have you read a history book? I would suggest that you do it before speaking on a topic such as this. But if I'm ever in politics, God help you all, no, I want my spin doctors to be just like you. So let's unspin this, right? So let's take a look at Ireland first of all. Famine. I don't know what Rory was trying to argue in that famine was a good thing, but funnily enough, folks, for the million people lying in unmarked graves across Ireland, wasn't a great thing for them. It also wasn't a great thing for the million of Irish that had to emigrate and were treated like shit in other countries that they moved to. But Roshing, this was a random occurrence. They didn't know how to help the Irish people. God love them, they tried. This was not a random occurrence. Famine actually occurred in India too, where they shipped off the wheat to their soldiers whilst people between 12 million and 29 million people starved. But Roshing, they didn't know the extent of this. They didn't know the extent of this. They weren't that evil on it. They weren't having an evil mindset. Well, Churchill, the face of the British Empire for many, many years, said, and I quote, I hate Indians. They are a beastly people with a, put your hand down, beastly people with a beastly religion. The famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits. But you know what? They didn't do that much harm, didn't they not? Just put your hand down. Okay, so what? That's what? A couple of million people's deaths? Does that not tip the scales for you yet? Okay, let's keep going. No, they did not take direct action though in those things. They were just, corrupt bystanders more so. Okay. Let's look at how they were, in fact, more than bystanders. Let's look at how the murder of innocents was a trademark of the British Empire too. No. So we're going to talk about in Ireland. This is where the stone comes in, folks. Now, don't I'll not throw it at you. I've already asked Caitlin, can I throw it at her? There was this thing called the Bachelor's Walk. Now, if you're not familiar with the Bachelor's Walk, it happened back in the 1900s. Put your hand down. Stop putting your hand up, you're not going to get answered. So, a bit like the British Empire oppressing people for multiple years ago. Okay, so the Bachelor's Walk, folks, is whenever there was a peaceful protest on and they were shouting at armed British soldiers going past. Now, I have to say, they did actually throw wee stones at them. Not rocks, stones. These things here. And they cursed at them. God forbid. So they did something like this. You're a bastard. You're an English bastard. Does she have the right to shoot me dead? Does she have the right to shoot me dead in cold blood? Well, the arms of the British Empire thought that they did. because they murdered a 50-year-old woman who was there just to protest the treatment of the Irish people at the time, a 46-year-old man and an 18-year-old wee lad. But Russian, that's just one incident. Like, come on, you know? Okay, Bloody Sunday.
Oh no.
No, Bloody Sunday happened, and the truth and recovery justice that came out of that was undermined. Why? Because the British Empire was doing in that moment exactly what it was intended to do. It was intended to suppress, oppress, murder, to prevent the truth from coming out. But tonight it will come out, fucking spite the proposition's arguments. But Russian, that's just Ireland. Lord knows that we're, yappy people. No, Lord knows that we're just yappy people, like it's just Ireland. No, India, let's look at India, the Amritsar massacre, in which a peaceful protest, they didn't even have the stones. They were just standing there and they were locked into a garden and shot at, and the general who was doing so was actually called a hero, and the people raised him £26,000. Why? Because he was doing exactly what the Empire asked him to do. Let's look at Ireland again. You might say, Russian, most of the troubles, it was done by the paramilitaries. No. There was institutionally endorsed violence by the Empire, because any and all violence that allows the indigenous people to be oppressed is good and sanctioned. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is collusion. What I mean by that is the RUC. What I mean by that is state-sanctioned, state-covered murder, such as the Glenanne Gang. No. Think of it, it's New Year's Eve 1976, you've decided you're not going to go out for the night, you're going to celebrate it with your family. You're waiting for the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bang! You're shot dead in cold blood in your living room. But it's covered up. Why? Because you're Irish, and because you're Irish means you're guilty, one and all. I could talk about the Reevy brothers, I could talk about Sheena Campbell, I could talk all night long, but I think I'm nearly over my time. But I'll talk for much longer and I'll ignore the bell. Okay, so now you're going to say the death of innocence. Right, the death of innocence is one. Murder, collusion, also rape. Look at the Mau Mau uprising, where thousands of Kenyans described being tortured and raped. One woman mentioned how she was beaten for information, and when she didn't give it, because she didn't have it, she was raped with a bottle filled with water and pepper. These are not the exceptions, folks. These are the norms, the normal actions of the British Empire. Are we truly going to say tonight that the buildings of bridges and roads, that the spread of democracy, that this outweighs the harm done by the British Empire? That this outweighs the lives ruined by the British Empire? That this outweighs the murder committed by the British Empire? Do not allow the proposition tonight to red, blue and whitewash history. There is not a Union Jack big enough to cover the dead victims' bodies of the British Empire, piled not in their hundreds, not in their thousands, but in their millions. The British Empire is a ship that sailed upon the blood of innocent men, women and children. Do not forget that tonight. Do not forget them tonight. Vote with the opposition or you're spitting on their graves. Garmail.